Dissimilarity. Allah is unique in his self, attributes, and doings. So he is dissimilar from everything. And not just that, too. Something occurred to me a few days ago. I was translating, and then it occurred to me, you know what's the word, maybe a good word for ahad? What does al-ahad mean? Al-ahad, some scholars said, means the same as al-wahid. Al-wahid means the one without a partner. They said al-ahad, some of them said al-ahad means the same thing. Some of them said al-ahad means the indivisible. Indivisible. Then occurred to me, there is a word in English. It means one and it means indivisible too, which is the word individual. Individual. Because individual, it has the word divide in there. So it means indivisible. One who's indivisible. So I just found that interesting. So Allah is unique in his self, attributes, and doings. So he is dissimilar from everything. Our Sheikh's habit was to use the expression non-resemblance. Dissimilarity is either relative or absolute. Relative means comparable. How could that be? Is that not an oxymoron? How could dissimilarity be comparable? You'll see here. Absolute means in any way whatsoever. So Allah is dissimilar to everything. Nothing is like him in any way whatsoever. That's the absolute dissimilarity. But you could be unlike something else, but doesn't mean in any way whatsoever. So that's the relative one. God's dissimilarity is absolute. Nothing resembles him in any way whatsoever. Neither partially nor identically. Partially means like it in some way, but unlike it in another way. Identical means alike in every way. Neither of those are applicable to Allah. If someone believes that Allah has a body, whether big or small, or if he believes that Allah has a soul, then he has likened Allah to the bodies and souls. If he believes that Allah inhabits the skies, he has likened Allah to the angels, and also to the sun and the stars, the clouds. If he believes that Allah spreads in all directions, then he likened Allah to the air. If he believes that Allah enters bodies, then he likened Allah to souls and genies, because the jinn could possess someone by entering him. Allah does not resemble the creatures with souls or the creatures without souls. If he believes that Allah changes, he likened Allah to all creations. Had changing and developing been possible to attribute to Allah, he would have needed someone to change him. If he believes that Allah sits, he likened Allah to the humans and the animals, including the insects. He would be saying that Allah has an upper part, a lower part, and a buttocks. Yani, we're talking here about the Arabic word julus. This is what the Arabic word julus means. So you wouldn't say about this phone, for example, that yajlisu ala al-ard, because I put the phone on the floor. You wouldn't say yajlisu ala al-ard, sitting on the floor. But in English, you might say it's sitting on the floor. So the meaning of sitting here and what we're saying is what's intended by the word julus in Arabic, which means specifically to have segments that fold and then the lower part contacts the surface. If someone believes that Allah is a light or darkness, he has likened Allah to the light and the darkness. Al-Tahawi said, وَمَنْ وَصَفَ اللَّهَ بِمَعْنًى مِنْ مَعَانِي الْبَشَرِ فَقَدْ كَفَرَ Whoever ascribes to Allah a meaning or an attribute among the meanings that pertain to the humans has blasphemed. This means whoever attributes to Allah an attribute of human significance, then he has blasphemed. فَمَنْ أَبْصَرَ هَذَا اعْتَبَرَ. Whoever looks into this takes warning. And here, he looked into it doesn't mean he looked into it with his eyes. It means he looked into it with the vision of his heart, with his mind. وَعَنْ مِثْلِ قَوْلِ الْكُفَّارِ زَجَرَ. And from the sayings of the blasphemers, he refrains. He therefore would refrain from what the blasphemers say. وَعَلِمَ أَنَّهُ بِصِفَاتِهِ لَيْسَ كَالْبَشَرِ. And he knows that he, being attributed with his attributes, does not resemble the humans. So you don't need the quotation marks when it's set aside like that. Now, and this statement of Tahawi has in it saja, that's rhymed prose. And Tahawi's text is full of it. So it rhymes. He says, but it's not metered. It doesn't have a beat. It just rhymes only without having a beat. So he says, وَمَنْ وَصَفَ اللَّهَ بِمَعْنًا مِنْ مَعَانِي الْبَشَرِ فَقَدْ كَفَرَ فَمَنْ أَبْصَرَ هَذَا اعْتَبَرَ وَعَنْ مِثْلِ قَوْلِ الْكُفَّارِ زَجَرَ وَعَلِمَ أَنَّهُ بِصِفَاتِهِ لَيْسَ كَالْبَشَرِ. Relative dissimilarity is like what is in the Prophet's rhetorical question. Ayyukum mithli, which of you is like me? He said that to his companions when they sought permission to be able to fast for more than a day consecutively. You know it's haram for a Muslim to fast for 2 days without breaking his fast. You're obligated to break your fast. It's obligatory, but not for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Not obligatory for him alayhi salatu wasalam. He could fast for days at a time without stopping in between. That was lawful for him because Allah enabled him. Allah empowered him to do so. And then after a while, he would get hungry and then he would eat in the daytime. Alayhi salatu wassalam. Some said that similarity is only confirmed by sharing all attributes. According to that, they don't deem two things similar unless they're identical. So if there were any difference between two things, even in a single way, they are not similar. That's not strong saying. Restricting similarity between two things to them having the same reality is invalid and incorrect, because linguistically it is valid to say so-and-so is like so-and-so in law, as a judge or a lawyer, if he is suitable to take his place, even if there were differences between them in other aspects. So we say that similarity between two things is confirmed even by one way. But that would only mean that they're not identical. They're similar in the way in which they can replace each other. That's where they're similar. They're similar in the way in which they could replace each other, and they're dissimilar in any other way. No, that's different. Now we're just talking about the wording. So when it comes to the same word, using the same word, then that doesn't confirm any similarity. That's called agreement in expression. Agreement in expression does not confirm any similarity because words can have more than one meaning. So we would just be using the same word with two different meanings. The ascription of this opinion to Al-Ash'ari is questionable, saying that this was Al-Ash'ari's way, that two things would only be similar if they're identical. To say that's Al-Ash'ari's way is questionable. Yani, that's disputable. because there is no explicit expression memorized from him about this issue. The generally accepted and recognized expressions necessitate that similarity is not conditional upon that. Meaning, what we say normally, the words that we could say normally would disprove that similarity is only confirmed by being identical on both sides. And here's an example. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, "Al-hintatu bil-hinta, mithlan bi-mithl." Wheat for wheat, like for like. This hadith is about riba, sales, usury in sales. This means that the likeness on both sides that must be present to prevent such a sale from being forbidden usury is volume only. Not all ascriptions, just the volume. Volume means how much space it takes up. Fills the same container. Your container of wheat for my container of wheat, same container. Doesn't mean they have to be all the same attributes, because maybe I have Mexican wheat and maybe you have South African wheat. I don't know. So the Prophet said, alayhi salatu wassalam, that they are similar. And he meant in volume only. He didn't mean in all ways. Yani, not that they are similar, but that they have to be similar for the sale to be valid. You want to sell wheat for wheat, they have to be similar in a way, which is volume. Therefore, if what is meant by two things being similar is that one could take the place of the other, that whatever one is good for, the other is good for, then no existing thing can replace him in his attributes. For his attributes, whether the knowledge, power, or otherwise, are far more sublime and higher than any ascription in the creation. So you're not going to get triggered by the word higher there. It means better, perfect. There is no suitability, correlation, analogy, or relationship between them. On the other hand, agreement in expression does not necessitate agreement in meaning. That's what we're just now saying. Thus, to say that a creature is knowledgeable is not likening Allah to the creature when we say Allah is knowledgeable. The knowledge of the human is eventual and fluctuating, increasing and decreasing. The knowledge of Allah is eternal and everlasting. So we're using the same word but different meaning. But I had a discussion with a philosopher once about this topic, and he insisted that no, this is likening God to the creation. This one, he was interested in marrying a Muslimah, but he was a kafir. So she asked me to talk to him, that maybe he would convert so that they could get married. But he didn't listen, mashallah. So I told him, this is only an agreement in expression. He said, no, it's not only an agreement in expression. He said, this is agreement in meaning, because you're saying he has a knowledge and we have knowledge. He's saying, it's like he's saying to me, you can't fool me. You're saying the same thing. It's just you're saying he has knowledge, you have knowledge. But knowledge, we know what knowledge means. I suspect a lot of people will get stuck here. They will not know how to answer this. So how do you answer that? The answer is here, which is that one of them cannot replace the other. When one cannot replace the other, then they're not similar. So similarity is by substitution. You can confirm similarity if you can confirm substitution. So if one cannot substitute for the other, then they're not similar to each other. So that's how you would answer such a person. Yeah. Yeah, because is it valid that the knowledge of the creature could be the attribute of Allah? It's not valid. Doesn't make sense. Or is it valid that the knowledge of Allah would be the knowledge of the creature? Also, it's not valid that the knowledge of Allah would be the knowledge of the creature. So they're not replaceable. One of them can't substitute the other. So they're not the same. On the other hand, uh, let's say one man is uh, a white man, another man's a black man. So they're both men. So if we needed a man, then they're similar. So either one could take the place of the other. But if we needed a white man, then the black man, then they're not similar because one cannot replace the other or substitute the other. That's clear. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they're similar in that way, because they're replaceable in that way. If there was a job that calls for a man, then whether he's white or he's black, they're both men, so they're similar in that. So either one of them can do it. But if there is a job that calls for a Chinese man, then neither of those could be, if you don't consider a Chinese man white, which usually they're not considered white. Now, so therefore, if what is meant by two things being similar is that one could take the place of the other, that whatever one is good for, the other is good for. That's the meaning of similarity. Then no existing thing can replace him in his attributes, for his attributes, whether knowledge, power, or otherwise, are far more sublime and higher than any ascription in the creation. There is no suitability or correlation or analogy or relationship between them. On the other hand, agreement in expression, which means we're only using the same word, it does not necessitate agreement in meaning, because one word could have many meanings. Thus, to say that a creature is knowledgeable is not likening Allah to the creature when we say Allah is knowledgeable, because the knowledge of the human is eventual and fluctuating and increasing and decreasing. So it's not suitable to be the knowledge of God. And the knowledge of Allah is eternal and everlasting, so it's not suitable to be the knowledge of the creation. So they're not interchangeable or replaceable or substitutable, so they're not similar. Abu al-Muzaffar said, وَأَن تَعْلَمَ أَنَّ كُلَّ مَا دَلَّ عَلَى حُدُوثِ شَيْءٍ, and that you know that everything that indicates the createdness of something, min al-haddi wa-nihaya, such as edge and limit, wal-makani wal-jiha, and place and direction, was-sukuni wal-haraka, and stillness and motion, فَهُوَ مُسْتَحِيلٌ عَلَيْهِ سُبْحَانَهُ وَتَعَالَى. It is all impossible to be attributed to him, the glorified and exalted. لِأَنَّ مَا لَا يَكُونُ مُحْدَثًا لِأَنَّ مَا لَا يَكُونُ مُحْدَثًا لَا يَجُوزُ عَلَيْهِ مَا هُوَ دَلِيلٌ عَلَى الْحُدُوثِ. For it is not valid that whatever is not created, or that anything that's not created would have any indication of being created. If something's not created, it wouldn't have a sign of createdness. The most explicit verse clearing Allah from resemblance is لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. Unlike him, is there anything? Absolutely. The word lays is the word of negation. It's the nafi. His saying kamithli loosely translates as like him. The kaf in kamithli, which originally means like, is added for emphasizing the negation of a similar, and it does not have its original meaning of likeness. So not to confirm a similar for him, the exalted. Meaning, if you took this ayah word for word, as literally as you could translate it, it would say nothing is like his likeness. So what would that mean? That would mean he has a likeness. So that's not what it means. So the kaf doesn't mean like here. So it doesn't mean nothing is like his likeness. This kaf that means like is taken out of its original meaning. And it became what's called harfun za'idun litawkid. That means a particle added for emphasis. A particle added for emphasis. There's many examples of that in Arabic. But this is why some scholars said, although we don't agree with this, some scholars said this ayah is mutashabi. That's not true. We don't say this ayah is mutashabi, meaning susceptible to more than one meaning. Really, this ayah is explicit. Because even though we are taking the kaf out of its original meaning, the meaning, the intended meaning of the ayah is clear, very clear. How did the Shaykh define muhkam and mutashabi or muhkam? He said muhkam ayah, which means explicit or decisive. It's an ayah that it only accepts one meaning in the Arabic language, or its intended meaning is clear. So that part right there, or its intended meaning is clear, that makes this a muhkam ayah. Because anyone who knows Arabic absolutely understands what's intended here. When you say laysa kamithli kada, or laysa kamithlihi, you say laysa kamithlihi, that's clear that it means unlike him. So the kaf in kamithlihi, which originally means like, is added for emphasizing the negation of a similar. And it doesn't have its original meaning of likeness. So not to confirm a similar for him, because mithal also means like. This is because if it were not an additive, it would mean similar. And then the apparent expression would mean nothing is like his similar. Kamithli. And that is a confirmation of a similar, which is mentally impossible. And it's the opposite of what is intended by the verse. What is meant by it is the negation of any similar. Hence, then the kaf is an addition with the purpose of emphasis. And a group of scholars said that the kaf is not additional. So then, if the kaf is not additional and the kaf means its original meaning, that means that they have to then give a different explanation to mithal. And they did. So they said, no, the kaf is by its original meaning and it's not an additive. And they said what's meant by mithal in the verse is self. So therefore it means nothing is like his self. Laysa kamithlihi, nothing is like his self. The saying of Allah, shay, means a thing or anything. It is indefinite, nakira, in the context of a negation. Because of laysa. Laysa is the negating word. And indefinite words promote absolute generality when presented in a negative context. Thus, all things are not similar to him. Yani, the meaning here is that there's a difference between saying unlike him is anything, so that's general, that since anything is indefinite, that makes it open. Unlike him is anything. So the indefiniteness of the word anything makes it open. As opposed to saying unlike him is that thing. So if you specify unlike him is the thing, now it's not open anymore. So by the word shay being indefinite and coming in a negated sentence, then that makes the negation applicable to everything that's covered by that indefinite word. Thus, all things are not similar to him. Is clear? Yeah. So the difference between saying uh, nothing is like him, and saying that thing is not like him. So if you say that thing is not like him, that doesn't mean another thing is not like him, though. But if you say no thing is like him, then that means everything is unlike him. So being indefinite, that's grammar word. Indefinite is a grammar term. Being indefinite in a negative sentence, that means a negating sentence, makes that negation applicable to everything that's called shay, thing, or something. First, Allah cleared himself of any resemblance. Laysa kamithlihi shay. Had he stopped there, it may have given the false impression that he does not have attributes. Had there not been something after that in the ayah, someone might have thought, then he doesn't have any attributes. So to ward off that false impression, he followed the negation of resemblance with the confirmation that he is وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ, that he is as-Sami'ul Basir, the hearer of all and the seer of all. So he negated likeness to himself and still confirmed attributes for himself. Then if you put those together, then it means his attributes are unlike the attributes of anything else or anyone else. And since he is not like the creations, then his hearing and sight are not like that of the creations. At-Tahawi said, وَلَا شَيْءَ مِثْلُهُ, nothing is like him. The mental argument that Allah does not resemble the creations is that we indeed assert when two things are similar, then whatever is possible for one is possible for the other. Very important there. A lot of people don't know the mental proof for dissimilarity. If you ask them, what's mental proof for existence? They would say, the world exists, so God exists. If you ask them, what's mental proof for beginninglessness? They would say, if he has beginning means someone created him, then he wouldn't be God. And you say, what's the mental proof for everlastingness? They would say, he's everlasting because he's beginningless. So having no beginning means he has no end. Because having no beginning means there was no non-existence. There was no non-existence. Non-existence is inapplicable. So then he must be everlasting. If you said, what's the evidence for mentally for oneness, then they have so many arguments they can use. The argument of mutual exclusivity, for example, that has different formulas. And you might say, what's the evidence for independence? So one could say, had he been needy, had he been dependent, he would be weak. Then he wouldn't be God. Then if you ask him, what's the mental proof for dissimilarity? They'll say, it'll be stuck there. So the answer is right here. Whenever two things are similar, then whatever is possible for one is possible for the other. That's the mental argument for God's dissimilarity. So if he were similar to the creation in one way, it would be valid for him to be similar to the creation in every way. And if he were similar to the creation in one way, then whatever could happen to the creation could happen to him. In Al-Bukhari, a man came to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam saying, Ya Nabi Allah, O Prophet of Allah, Inna imra'ati waladat ghulaman aswad. Indeed, my wife gave birth to a black child. But he's not black and his wife's not black. That's the problem. And he was hinting at denying the child. فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم, should be a while there. هل لك من إبل؟ فقال نعم. قال ما ألوانها؟ قال حمر. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, do you have any camels? The man said, yes. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, what color are they? The man said, read. فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم هل فيها من أورق. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, are any of them awraq? Means dirty white. The man said, قال نعم, yes, إن فيها أورق. Some are indeed awraq. قال فأنا ذلك. The Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, how's that? قال لعل عرقا نزعه. The man said, perhaps it was ancestry. Like he's saying, maybe a vein brought it out. قال ولعل ولدك نزعه عرق. So the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, perhaps this child of yours has been brought out by ancestry. And notice that the Prophet confirmed it as his child. Waladaka. Perhaps this child of yours also has been brought out by ancestry. This hadith shows that two similar things can have the same attribute. The human and the camel are both bodies and both have colors. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam showed the possibility of what happened to the offspring of one happening to the other. Hence, if Allah were like the creation, he would be susceptible to the same things they are. Consequently, had he been attributed with any attribute of the creatures, he could possibly have every attribute of the creatures, like change, development, sickness, and destruction. Then it would be possible that the sun and moon be God, or even a pole, or a stick, or anything, a nail clipper. And that's what they put like in those movies and stuff. One of those shows they made like so-called hippopotamus god and alligator god and all the crazy stuff they do. Had he resembled the creation, he would need a specifier. If he has a specifier, then he is needy, and this is misguidance. Then this specifier would make him resemble all creations or some of them. If God had a specifier, that would mean he has a creator. Then this specifier is going to make him be like all other creations, or going to make him like only some creations. So if he resembled all of them, then he would have an independent existence, and he would be self-contained for resembling particles and bodies. And he would have a dependent existence, yani he would be also existing as, or by extension of something else, for resembling characteristics and properties, because that's all the creations. All the creations means what has volume and what's the property of a volume. So if he resembles all creations, then it means he resembles volumes and he resembles properties. If he resembles volumes, means he has independent existence. If he resembles properties, means he has a dependent existence. Thus, he would simultaneously be existing dependently yet independently. And it is impossible that what has an autonomous existence would not have an autonomous existence. That's clear? Yes. I'll read the whole section there. So let me even back up further again. So we're saying if he were like a creation, then whatever could happen to the creation could happen to him. That's clear. And if he's like the creation, then it means he has a specifier. That's clear. If he has a specifier, that means someone who makes him one way or another. Then he's going to make him either resemble all the creations or some of the creations. That's clear? Okay. So now let's look. What does all the creations mean? All the creations boils down to two things. Something with a volume that fills a space, or the properties of such a thing. That's clear? Okay. So if he resembles all the creations, means he resembles both of these types. So the things that fill their own space, that means they have their own standing. They are self-contained. But the things that don't have their own standing are not self-contained, the properties. So if he resembles all creations, that means he resembles something that exists independently, and he resembles something that does not exist independently. So then, how would someone who has an independent existence not have an independent existence? How would someone who does not have an independent existence have an independent existence? Understand? He can't be like both of them, but if he resembles all the creations, he would be like both of them. So that's impossible. So if he had a specifier, then this specifier is going to make him be like everything or some things. If he makes him be like everything, then that's what we just addressed now. So I'm going to reread this. If he resembled all creations, he would have an independent existence for resembling particles and bodies, things that have volume, things that are self-contained. And he would at the same time have a dependent existence for resembling characteristics. Thus, he would be simultaneously existing dependently yet independently. And that is impossible. It's impossible that what has an autonomous existence, autonomous means independent. It is impossible that what has an autonomous existence would not have an autonomous existence. Is this clear? If he resembled only some creations, then whatever he resembled would be a characteristic or have volume. Which one he resembles then if it's only some of them? The ones that have their own standing, that are self-contained, or the ones that exist by extension of something else? If he resembles all characteristics, then he would be like all contradictory qualities. He would have been black and white and life and death and hot and cold, etc. That's if he resembles all the characteristics. If he resembles any characteristic, he still would not have an independent existence, as said. Then he would need a sight through which to be confirmed, yani, because he would be existing by extension of something else. But then that sight would be more deserving of being God than him, because he would only be its quality. Because the sight is stronger than its attribute. The sight, the vessel, is more significant than its attribute. The volume, the thing that takes up a space and has its own standing and it's self-contained, it is more significant than any quality that it has that exists by extension of it. Furthermore, among the conditions for being the creator is to be alive and knowledgeable and powerful and willing. And it is impossible that a characteristic would have such a description. A property or a characteristic wouldn't be alive and knowledgeable and powerful and willing. That's what you say to an atheist when he tells you nature is creator. Tell him, how could nature be creator? Nature is not alive or powerful or knowledgeable or willing or hearing. So what if he says, I think it is? Then you say to him, so what kind of atheist are you? And you confirm the existence of God. You just want to take the word God and put the word nature. That's all he's doing. Had he resembled all the bodies, he would simultaneously be dense and subtle. Because some bodies are dense, you can grab them by the hand. Some bodies are subtle, you can't capture them in the hand. So if he resembled all the bodies, then he would be dense and subtle. And if he resembled any body, then he would necessarily have the judgment of any body. What's the judgment of any body? No body is devoid of the events that alternate upon it. Thus, it would be necessary for him to be a vessel for alternating events if he were a body, like motion and stillness. And whatever is not devoid of events does not precede them. And whatever does not precede events is itself an event. We talked about that when we talked about beginningless chain. So review that. If that's not clear for you, review that. We talked about that. Whatever does not come before an event, it is itself an event. What does event mean? Event means something that has a beginning. Who's the one who exists before all the events? God. God is the one who exists before all events. So that means he's not an event. Anything that can't exist before events exist, it is an event itself. Therefore, since createdness for the eternal is invalid, it is invalid that he resembles anything created. This is why a sun worshiper can refute a jihawi. Jihawi means someone who believes that God is in a direction. That passed already. If you don't remember what jihawi means you didn't review, didn't study. When he says that Allah has God in a place above us, that jihawi, like a Wahhabi is a jihawi, a Christian is a jihawi. Whoever believes that God is in a place above us, he's a jihawi. Jihawi means he believes God has jiha. Jiha means direction. This is why a sun worshiper can refute a jihawi, because he's a jihawi too, isn't he? He is the sun worshiper. When he says that Allah is God in a place above us, the jihawi, the sun worshiper, he will say, but the sun is God in a place above us. So it's jihawi versus jihawi. However, the sun worshiper has an advantage in his argument. They're both upon falsehood, though. The sun worshiper can say the sun is seen by everyone and everyone recognizes its benefit. But what you worship is a figment of your imagination. And not everyone recognizes its benefit. You have never seen it, nor has anyone else. This thing that, if he's Wahhabi, he's going to say, this thing that you believe is over the throne. You never saw it. Nobody else ever saw it. Everything that the likener uses as evidence to invalidate the claim of the sun worshiper invalidates his own creed, because they have the same creed except that the sun worshiper can see the object that he's worshiping, and he can sense the benefit he gets from the object that he's worshiping. Actually, the likener is unable to establish any definitive evidence against anyone who worships other than Allah. Yani, the people who liken Allah to the creations by misinterpreting the ayats of the Quran, there's different groups of them. They don't all believe the same thing. None of them can refute the other because they're all doing the same thing. So you have some of them who are saying Allah is over the throne because they brought the ayah, Ar-Rahman wa ala al-arsh istawa. But then you have some other ones who said, no, Allah is everywhere because he said, وَهُوَ مَعَكُمْ أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُمْ. He's with you wherever you are. So now you have one against the other. So the Wahhabi is going to tell him, La, Ar-Rahman wa ala al-arsh istawa. That ayah doesn't mean Allah is with you wherever you are. It means his knowledge. So this other one is going to say, La, وَهُوَ مَعَكُمْ أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُمْ. He's with you wherever you are. That ayah you're using to say he's over the throne, that means that he has greatness. Neither of them can defeat the other. They're doing the same thing.
وَسُبْحَانَ اللَّهِ وَبِحَمْدِهِ